Welcome to That's So Rad podcast. I'm your host, Travis Vonksness. This is a podcast about people, their passions, their life experiences, and their stories. As writer Frederick Buechner once said, the story of any one of us is in some measure the story of us all. All of us can learn something valuable from someone else's life and their stories. Join us for another conversation where we learn, laugh, and leave, seeing our own life in new ways. What's more rad than that? Surge, a fully loaded citrus soda with carbos. Feed the rush. Welcome to the show. I'm Travis, and today's going to be a fun, nostalgic ride as we look at one of the famous, iconic 90s sodas and really products. I was thinking, have this podcast, That's So Rad. A lot of rad stories. It's been a lot of themes around nostalgia. We had an episode that talked about the word rad, where that came from. And I was just thinking, I got to include an episode on Surge. So that we're going to surge right into it. So, before I get started on a little bit more of the backstory of why Surge, also for me personally, and what's my, I don't know, there's a love affair of this storage soda. And maybe I'm going to blame Surge on me getting into energy drinks in I want to say like around 2005. So I'm going to talk a lot more about Surge in this, but Surge, the first iteration, really died out in 2003. So, and then we have energy drinks sort of kind of taking the space after that. And so I don't know, I'm going to blame Surge being my gateway drug into energy drinks in the, like I said, 2005 era when living in St. Louis. At the time, single, actually living with my cousin Russ in St. Louis. And back in the day, did a lot of shopping at Big Lots. And Big Lots, cheap, if you've never, and I think that store went out of, no longer exists, but was always known for like overstock of things, or just kind of weird things that I always used to joke, like Big Lots is where, products come to die. It's like maple syrup, peanut butter flavored, Captain Crunch. That never took off. It's a Big Lots. So, but I remember they always had a slew of energy drinks, and they're cheap. And so I partook of quite a few energy drinks. When I was dating my wife, Jessie, became my wife, she talked about when she first met me and some of our first few dates, like I had like a noticeable tick, like the overconsumption of energy drinks. But one of my greatest stories, and so I actually had a collection of cans too. I had them on display. But one of my crazy memories of my energy drink addiction is it was a can called it was called the Black Hole. And at the time, me and Russ went on a road trip to South Carolina to see my family. We were in St. Louis, about 11-hour drive, somewhere in there. And we got to leaving late. And so when you're young, you kind of do these kind of things. And I think we ended up driving through the night. And I think I drove a lot of that drive. And I remember I drank a can of the Black Hole. And I remember in that 11-hour drive, I told Russ, like when we got there, like I didn't even yawn. Like I never yawned on this. And it's like, that can't be good. That cannot be good for you. But we made it there safely. Okay. So anyway, let's go back to Surge. So I think that, so anyway, this is around, so like I said, Surge ended around, it went out of production around 2003. But again, I've always been so nostalgic, and I think it was like around, again, like say 05, 06, somewhere in that new energy drink era for me. I was on eBay and ordered a couple Surges, including the OG can design here, the big splash. And then I love that can. And then the newer version, or the newer one of this, had a different kind of a yellowish design, a little less bold. But anyway, so, and I drank them, and when you drink a soda like that, that's been it's already super unhealthy, and then it's like now like 3-4 years sitting in just a can. I mean, it can't be a whole lot better than drinking Windex, I can't imagine. But in terms of what it does to you inside, but so yep, I did that, and that kind of then from there I got a Surge alarm clock that screams Surge to wake you up, and I think I got a large inflatable Surge can. So that in the kind of early 2000s, I kind of had this revisiting of this can of soda. But what I wanted to do in this episode is talk about, kind of some of the nostalgia around this. If you grew up or went to school in the 90s, hard not to think about Surge on the scene. But also it's a really, really fascinating look at marketing as well, and kind of consumerism on as the story of Surge is sort of a zombie story coming back to life a couple times, and how that's led by just like a cult movement, and kind of how that comes to be. So I'm going to kind of walk through just some of the history of kind of what happened, where did Surge come from, who were they competing against, what was all on the scene. Maybe there's a few of you that'll geek out on this, and that may be just that may be all of us. But so this is a fun episode for me to do. So going back in time, Mountain Dew, which eventually becomes a Coca-Cola product, was originally a standalone product on its own, hailing from Knoxville, Tennessee, by two brothers who invented it as a lemon lime soda to mix. Think more like 7-Up, that they mixed with their bourbon. And they called it Mountain Dew as a homage to moonshining in East Tennessee. And so that's what the original sort of formula of Mountain Dew was. Later, the formula becomes changed up and then it's acquired by Pepsi Company in 1964. So this is how far back we go. As their high octane citrus drink to add to the cola market. And then I didn't know that it was that old. And then in the 60s and 70s, the bottles featured a cartoon hillbilly holding a shotgun. And the ad phrase was, "Yahoo, Mountain Dew, it'll tickle your innards." And so they're still leaning into their kind of moonshine mountain kind of branding from the origin back at predating the 60s. And then Pepsi realizes that, maybe going just with an Appalachian theme is a little bit limiting across the country and world. So they overhauled the brand, and then that kind of phases out into the 80s. And then the early 90s were hit with this kind of new extreme version of or sort of extreme branding that kind of really is pioneering. Kind of think X Games, snowboarding, skateboarding, kind of the young teenage outdoor BMX kind of culture of like, that's who their demographic was shifting to. It is brilliant because it explodes. Mountain Dew has 80% of the market share at this time, going into kind of the mid 90s. Now, Coca-Cola, where was Coca-Cola this whole time? So I don't know about some of the other potential citrus sodas that were kind of predating this, but Mellow Yellow comes into existence in 1979, the year I was born. And just cannot keep up with any. I mean, it's getting blown away by Mountain Dew. And so they're in this land of how do you compete with this extreme, kind of teenage boy, outdoor wild extreme sports thing. Kind of tough when your name is Mellow. You have Mellow in the title. Kind of going to be tough to overcome, I think. But so what happens is Coca-Cola knows they have to become much more bold, aggressive. They have to get into this niche market. And, well, it's more than niche. I mean, it's massive. And so they launch a formula in Norway. This is why I love Surge. I mean, everything about this. We have huge Norwegian heritage, so ancestry. So here we are in Norway in 1996, randomly, and they try a test of this thing they call Urge. Massive success in Norway. And for all we know, I don't know what the Norwegian soda consumption was. Maybe this is one of their first major products, and it's like it wouldn't have mattered what it was. But so that kind of becomes a proof concept for Coca-Cola. So in January of 97, it's time to launch Surge, which codenamed internally their Mountain Dew Killer. What then happens, and this is where I think the story really gets interesting, is from a marketing standpoint, is that Surge, in its attempt to wage war with Mountain Dew, is branded. It's kind of marketed not just as a beverage, but more as a lifestyle. So, which fits perfectly in tune with that whole like grunge meets extreme sports in the 90s aesthetic, chaotic, the logo, as we saw, it's just extremely, kind of 90s and just loud and in your face. And so their plan was to outdo Mountain Dew with their own game of extremism appeal. And it becomes their hold my beer moment. Slogan is feed the rush. And they debut spending millions and millions. I can't remember if it was 50 million or it was a massive amount of money. In Super Bowl 31, an ad that features a frantic group of young men sprinting through obstacles to secure a single bottle of Surge. And if you grew up then or remember seeing those videos, I mean, you can't forget these. I mean, it was, and that kind of became the theme of Surge marketing and videos, was just these really wild, aggressive commercials where it was always like a narrator off camera that was voicing, kind of what's happening here and throwing out words that are kind of aggressive and things. And then it's always like crazy obstacles. They're kind of clamoring over each other, knocking each other down, jumping, pushing each other to get to the Surge. Later, some of their commercials, kind of get even up the ante of even more extreme, where they're kind of in vehicles racing, and it's just crazy stuff, always to get to that Surge can. But there's just this pandemonium, chaos, and sort of crazy image. And really, it was effective marketing. I mean, Surge became a staple in high school vending machines, skateboard parks. And it actually started to put a dent in Mountain Dew's marketing share. Didn't significantly. I think at the peak of Surge in around 2004, maybe a year out, I think it knocked down, I want to say Mountain Dew's, marketing share from in the citrus soda department from like 80% to maybe the mid 60s. So it definitely put a dent that Mellow Yellow wasn't able to do. But it kind of meets its like kind of peak at that point. And this is where things get really fascinating, kind of from this marketing kind of thing. So what happens then is, so I guess in a way, like Surge, it's like it was so successful in the marketing that I think, why does it come to vending machines? Because now it's super popular among teens. You can probably see, they're like, this is the coolest drink. And so becomes hugely popular in schools. But, and this is where the story turns, is that what starts to happen kind of in this era of 99 to 03, this is kind of where we now start going down. Surge is meeting its demise. There becomes a lot of like parents and probably school administrators, all that are like really concerned at the amount of caffeine, sugar, and what this is doing to their kids in school. And same with parents, like, what is this? The health aspect. And so what happens is schools start stripping Surge out of vending machines. It kind of becomes more like known, like, hey, this is either a dangerous drink or like this is just making our kids crazy. Like, let's dial this back. But what's really fascinating is that Surge actually had fairly significantly less caffeine than Mountain Dew. If you want to compare can to can, 12 ounce to 12 ounce, Mountain Dew had 54 milligrams of caffeine, Surge 38. So that's significantly less, and even less sugar. So at the end of the day, like, Mountain Dew is thriving, alive and well, totally cool being there, doing its thing, continue to like own the market. And meanwhile, Surge is no longer surging, and its sales plummet. It's pulled. It's kind of banned. It becomes now this like, thing we have to sort of get rid of. And so what ends up happening is the extreme marketing movement, I think, is what gained it. It's almost as if the marketing movement and the popular Surge kind of mirrored the commercial of just like extremely fast, chaotic, clamor forward with momentum, gets it, and then it just, completely comes apart. Because what's happening is how much of the kids in school, if you're still having Mountain Dew, and that never changed, but you're appearing even more like frantic, chaotic, wild, crazy at school, but you're actually drinking something with less caffeine and even a little less sugar, is it really then the drink? I mean, obviously it's enough caffeine and sugar to like make any teenager crazy anyway. Doesn't take much. But I think it was sort of becomes that I think a lot of the kids were in some ways just sort of acting out the commercials and like embodying what like the culture, what the identity of Surge is. And therefore, like, that marketing scheme, that sort of image, that brand is in the end what actually kills the brand. So it is really fascinating to look back at that, because because then you're kind of like, so Red Bull comes on the scene in like 97, I think. I don't remember that until like early 2000s. Monster and Rockstar come out in the early 2000s. But the thing about those is Red Bull, when it kind of comes out into the late 90s, it's not coming out with that same like extreme kind of 90s frenetic, at least Surge and even Mountain Dew kind of X Games things. It actually is sort of the complete opposite of, they kind of were known for at least coming out and originally with kind of these cartoon sketches that were animated that showed like people solving mundane problems. Like, it becomes sort of this brain fuel. And so it's like really fascinating how something that was probably then significantly more caffeine than Surge takes sort of the opposite approach and has this really like just, I'm going to work on a math problem and drink this Red Bull and it'll really make me think more clearly, instead of just like, I'm going to get on a skateboard and jump off a 2-story building and chase, it's just like, so that's pretty fascinating to look back on. That's I don't know. I just love thinking about how the marketing and sort of how it sort of backfires in the end. And, I don't know, hindsight 2020, what would it have done differently? I don't know. I think Mountain Dew just owned it, and it would have been hard to crack that nut. I think maybe the marketing that it did was the best it would have done, because it did, break into that to some degree. So continues to be a fascinating story, though, is that in 2011, and I picked up on this some point. I remember reading about this, like, in the end of the, 2010, 2011, that there becomes this surge movement that becomes this grassroots cult, kind of following that sort of, with social media now becoming much more on the scene and helping shape things, leverages the power of social media. And really crazy, back in Facebook, a group that swells to thousands of members, flooded Coca-Cola's consumer hotlines. They end up buying billboard space near Coke's headquarters in Atlanta. And I think it's, said something about bring back Surge, or it kind of just appeal to Coke to bring it back. Somewhere in between this and what happens next, Vault comes on the scene. If you remember that, it's a green soda can, green soda as well, and it kind of has even the logo, what appeared to look kind of Surge like, and I think some speculated that was sort of Coke's sort of, okay, we're gonna respond to this and kind of be a new version of Surge. Vault did not last very long. I do remember that. But the big breakthrough is that 2014, this sort of coordinated fan campaign has a Surge comes to life. It comes out in cans. I think there are 4-packs, 16-ounce tall boys, and available exclusively on Amazon. I think initially when it drops, fall of 2014, sold out first hour, sold out next hour, constantly sold out. Obviously limited batches, but it's just unbelievable, like the reception to it. And again, back to sort of the fascinating history of Surge, that grassroots campaign, just by lovers of the product, becomes the first time ever that Coke had brought back a discontinued brand solely because of social media. So it's kind of the power of a voice. And then and this is where I remember, so in 2015, it kind of ups it even more, and it starts to come out into retail stores and shelves, gas stations. And I remember learning of this. We were house parents at a children's home for kids in foster care here in South Carolina. We had moved down here in 2013. So around this time, 2015, it's actually in gas stations. And I remember very vividly, we worked with elementary boys. And, when you're in a house like that, and, we'd mountain bike and do things together. And what I loved about that is, kind of introducing the boys to stuff, for some of my passions and some of, the things I was into. And they were a lot of times really receptive, like, oh, Mr. Travis likes that, or, oh, that's cool, kind of looking up to me and stuff. And I remember I took them out and I got the boys Surges, and they heard all about it and the stories and, Surge and all that stuff. And then I realized, them drinking 16-ounce tall boys of Surge probably is not the best regular thing to do, but it did become a fun kind of little, hey, let's go get a Surge, and just kind of having them experience what was, I guess 96 is when Surge comes out. So my kind of late, anyway, high school teen years, but super cool. So a cool memory. Surgemovement.com still exists because it has now been pulled again. Generally, I think it was still back in Burger King randomly as a syrup for kind of some fountain machines. I don't know if that still exists, but I did hop on the surgemovement.com, which I love their slogan: join the effort of the community that brought Surge soda back to the market. And as they say, until Surge is available in a store near you, there is work to do. There is work to do. So that is the living history of one of the most iconic 90s products, consumer products. And as a soda, it's really a fascinating story, as I've shared. And I think it has this zombie-ness to it as well, of like, coming back to life and terrorizing parents and teachers, that this wild caffeine, high octane drink making our kids crazy is back in their hands. So anyway, I thought it'd be a fun episode to do on Surge and look back at some of our childhoods, but history with that. And there you have it. So, alrighty. Well, until next time, feed the rush. Hope you enjoyed the episode today. Check out the show notes for any links or resources shared in the episode. If you enjoy the podcast, it would be really appreciated if you'd subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share it with friends. May we all remember these words from writer Mary Oliver: instructions for living a life. Pay attention, be astonished, tell about it.